According to the Treasury, we could now be less than a month away from the United States defaulting on their debts, and no clear plan in place to pass legislation to raise the debt ceiling.
Have you ever wanted a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, you have come to the right place, because you are listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, episode 15 of season 2.
Just a reminder, as we do every week, we release every Wednesday and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It is currently Monday, May 1st, 2023, at about 8:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, and as always, packed show. A lot of sports to focus on, but we'll start with on the political side, as we always do. And Charlie, how about we start in the state of Montana?
Yes, Montana's representative in the House has been shut off from the House floor. Colin, can we get a little bit more on exactly why, and obviously that this was politically motivated, but politically motivated in what way?
Yeah, so this is Representative Zoe Zephyr. She is trans, which is why the Republicans shut her off the floor. Attempted to shut her off committees, but were unsuccessful in doing so. So she, though, currently banned from the floor, which means that she cannot take votes, can't speak on the floor. And Charlie, this seems quite similar to what happened in Tennessee. Just a few weeks ago, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, both expelled from that chamber for protesting gun violence. Gloria Johnson also almost expelled from the Tennessee State House as well. And you see something similar but slightly different happening in Montana, though for a completely different reason.
But however, crucially in Tennessee, and this might end up happening as well in Montana, those were later returned and rebuked as those representatives were allowed to come back.
Yeah, bring up an interesting point, though, because the problem is she's not been expelled. She's just been banned from the floor, so there's not much that anyone else can do about it. She is suing, saying that she deserves, or she has the right to be on the floor as a duly elected member of the state house. We'll see how that suit goes, but another fascist move, as we're seeing a lot.
I don't think that comparison is all too fair. I do agree that the current Republican Party is moving in that direction. They will possibly eventually get there, but I do think that claim is not quite accurate as of currently.
All right, fair. It's also just a few hours before we started recording this episode, there were a few big retirements announced, and the first one is in the state of Maryland. Charlie, this is Ben Cardin, Democratic senator from Maryland. His term is up at the end of 2024. He is expected to not seek re-election, so that'll be an open primary. Obviously, Maryland, a safe blue state, but the primary there could be quite competitive.
Yeah, we'll see. Of course, you never really know exactly what's going to happen until it gets closer, but considering Maryland's history in voting, it is very likely that this will still remain Democratic.
Yeah, and also Maryland is now, it's now the second seat the Democrats have to defend in 2024 with a retiring senator. The other one is Michigan, Debbie Stabenow retiring. We'll see about Bernie Sanders or some others that might also retire 2024, but that, of course, makes it tougher for Democrats in an already very, very difficult map for them in 2024.
And in another retirement, more close to home for us in Seattle, Governor Jay Inslee is set to not seek re-election for another term. And this is interesting because it sets in motion a possible change in Washington's classic liberal voting blue streak that's been going since the 1990s. So can we get a little bit more on exactly what might happen?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Washington, definitely a blue state by almost 20 points. I would say I don't expect that to change. The problem is that the bench of Democratic candidates in Washington state is not incredibly deep at the moment. Bob Ferguson, the Washington State Attorney General, is considered to be the front runner to replace Inslee in 2024. But beyond that, the bench for Democrats in the state is not incredibly deep. They have Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell in as their senators. Murray just won another term, but she's getting old. You have to wonder if this is her last term. Maria Cantwell, we expect to run for re-election in 2024, but eventually those women are going to have to be replaced. And is it maybe Pramila Jayapal? Can she even win a statewide election? Very important questions as Washington Democrats try to grapple with their future right now.
And it'll be interesting to see, because we'll see how the Republicans in Washington can possibly take advantage of this and maybe, though unlikely, flip the state.
You want a hint? They're not flipping the state, right? Washington Republicans are in disarray at the moment. Their last few statewide candidates have been a disaster. We're talking people like Lauren Culp, who ran off of his record as a police chief in the town of Republic, Washington. It turns out he was also the only police officer from that town. He lost the governor's race in 2020 by 20 points and has still not conceded that race to this very day. Ran for the House in 2022, lost. Also, Republicans lost Washington's 3rd congressional district because they nominated a far-right candidate instead of the incumbent Jamie Herrera Butler, and he lost to a Democrat, flipping a seat, and a seat that may very well stay flipped in 2024 in Democrats' favor. So Washington Republicans not in a good spot.
Certainly not. And also announced this week, good news for Democrats, is Joe Biden will seek re-election.
Yeah, and I mean, we had to know that this was expected.
This was expected. It was huge. It hadn't officially been announced. It now has been announced. So this sets up, in all likelihood, a Biden and Trump rematch for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look right now at that Republican primary, Trump has been steadily building a lead as DeSantis is just imploding at the moment.
Yes, as DeSantis continues at every single opportunity to not only shoot himself in the foot, at this point, he's just shot himself in the head several times.
Exactly. And then Biden don't anticipate any serious challengers. Most potential candidates, such as Gavin Newsom or Bernie Sanders, have already endorsed Biden. Leaves the main challengers as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., anti-vaxxer who's not going to win, and Marianne Williamson, another anti-vaxxer who does not have the name Kennedy, who's going to lose by even more.
Yeah. So it is really looking like a Trump-Biden rematch. Of course, if you remember 2020, the chaos surrounding that election, hopefully this does not happen again.
And this, by the way, Charlie, real quick, does not seem like a matchup that most voters want.
No.
Overwhelmingly, people are ready, fairly or not, to pass it on to the next generation. Age is a big concern, particularly for Biden, even though he does seem to be in much better health than Trump. And frankly, for an 80-year-old, seems to be in pretty good health, both mentally and physically. But he will be 86 at the end of a potential second term. So that obviously is going to weigh on the mind of voters.
Yes, also considering the fact that Biden is still currently the oldest serving U.S. president.
Yeah, already, and he's asking for 4 more years.
Of course, we're continuing to report on the chaos that is U.S. politics as it continues. But we do have some news from the White House Correspondents Dinner. Can we get a little bit more on what this is and what happened?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, White House Correspondents Dinner is just basically, it's a big party in D.C. every year thrown by the White House Correspondents Association, which is the group of journalists that cover the White House. A bunch of politicians show up, journalists from all over the country, celebrities, a big party, and as is tradition, the president gives a speech, and generally a comedic speech. So Biden did some roasting at the speech. He was actually pretty good. He went after Ron DeSantis for his anti-LGBTQ policies. He went after Elon Musk for his complete failure with Twitter. He went after Fox News and especially Tucker Carlson, who just got fired. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Lots of really good jokes from the president. And Roy Wood Jr., the headliner for the evening Daily Show correspondent, gave another quite funny speech. A highlight was him comparing Clarence Thomas to an NFT. So it's a fun evening. Recommend that you go check out video if you have not seen it yourself.
And now some news blending both politics, government oversight, and money. First Republic Bank is the third bank this year to collapse. They were taken over by the government and sold a few hours later to JP Morgan Chase. This comes after last month, in very late March, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, which, looking forward, is this a long-term concern for the U.S. banking sector?
I don't know. I know that there is a much more immediate concern that will impact, I feel like, banking and the rest of the economy, which is the debt ceiling, Charlie, as according to the Treasury, we could now be less than a month away from the United States defaulting on their debts and no clear plan in place to pass legislation to raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah, that plan is still really not gone anywhere so far. The Democrats are unwilling to compromise with the Republicans. The Republicans are unwilling to compromise with the Democrats on an issue that could possibly very much damage this country's credibility with its finances.
Yeah, the Democrats' argument here is that there should just be a clean raise, no concessions regarding spending cuts, because the nation is required to pay its bills. That's part of its duty. So they should do that. Republicans are trying to force the Biden administration's hands. They've passed a bill that would include significant cuts to spending, including with veterans' health care, and also green energy policy. Biden does not seem willing to accept any of that. The Senate likely in the coming weeks to put both that Republican bill from the House on the Senate floor, as well as just a clean debt ceiling hike. We don't know where this is going, and that's a scary prospect as time continues to tick down.
Well, considering the Democrats only want the clean, no any changes to it proposal, that's not going to get past the Republicans in the House, and the Republican plan to cut spending is not going to make it past the Senate.
It's a question of who will blink first.
Or will no one blink at all?
With a time limit.
As the fate of the U.S. credibility hangs in the balance.
Yes, it does. Move overseas where there's a war going on in Russia and Ukraine. And Charlie, we just had a recent development that's making this look worse and worse for Russia.
Yes, Russia launched a massive rocket and artillery strike against Ukraine, and the Ukrainian air defense shot it down. There were very little missiles that landed. I don't know if any of them actually landed, and this is a disaster for Russia, who has been able to continuously bombard Ukrainian electricity and utilities for most of the war, which was very harmful to Ukrainian morale. And now that this is beginning to falter, there's concerns that Russia has lost control over the skies.
Yeah, and this is partly possibly due to the Patriot air defense system, I think. And this would be a big deal, because if Russia cannot win the war from the skies, then they have to win it on land. And Russia is not winning a war on land. It's not happening.
Yeah, this looks very much bad for them. And we shall see how this continues. In other news in Europe as well, King Charles will be officially coronated this Saturday, making him the third king to take the name Charles after Elizabeth, of course, died in September of 2022. This is a momentous occasion for Britain, but not much effect on the U.S. I just thought it would be important to mention this, as the last time this happened was 1953.
Yeah, will Rishi Sunak still be Prime Minister on Saturday?
We'll see. That's always a question.
On the other hand, in terms of general election polling in the UK, it seems to be getting slightly better for the Tory party, and questions are, is Labour really going to blow this again?
We'll see. That is interesting, considering the Tories' numbers dropped completely when COVID hit, the war in Ukraine, the disastrous
Everything.
handling of the economy, Boris Johnson, all that
Particularly
stuff
Boris.
very much harmed the Tories' chances here. But, of course, now that Sunak has come in, relatively stabilized the situation. It's not fully stabilized yet. They still have some issues to fix. But yeah, we shall see. That gap is getting closer and closer in polling. And the election is still a few years off, so we shall have to see if this trends do continue. Because if they do, I do have some doubts.
Yeah, this is the C&C Talks podcast. Thanks for listening as we move on to the back half of our show. And we're going to start with the NFL draft on this. Bryce Young, Charlie, going number 1 as expected to the Carolina Panthers. What's your reaction on this?
Yeah, this is not really a surprise. I do think he was the best quarterback available in the draft. Smart move by the Carolina Panthers. The question is now, looking forward, even 5-10 years into the future, how much did they overspend on Bryce Young? There's not a question on if they did. They did. It's just how much did they overspend?
Yeah, that trade with the Bears, they gave up a lot. The Texans, meanwhile, had just an insane draft at the top, drafting C.J. Stroud, Ohio State quarterback, number 2 overall, then making a trade with the Cardinals to go get Will Anderson Jr. at number 3 overall, so back-to-back picks. A couple of top players, Charlie.
Yeah, this was very unexpected. We expected maybe the Titans to try to trade up for that pick. I heard some other names bounced around, but Texans, very surprising move. This really helps them for the future. I still don't see them doing anything in the next 1 or 2 years, but it is very good for the future of that organization.
Yeah. What are some other teams that you really liked their drafts? I feel like the Eagles have got to be one of them.
The Eagles nailed their draft. I think that they very likely had the best draft, and one of the best teams in the league gets even stronger. Can anyone in the NFC beat them at this point?
Can anyone in the league beat them at this point?
Kansas City, that's really it.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like Jalen Carter, still a red flag. We'll see where it goes. I think it's very telling that the top 8 teams all passed on him, but he was the most talented player in the draft. We'll see if he is actually able to live up to the hype.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions surrounding him. A lot of people were suggesting that he'd maybe go at number 5 to Seattle. That did, of course, not happen. And speaking of Seattle, what a draft they had as well.
Yeah, that's another great draft. Did not do the expected thing. I feel like drafting Devon Witherspoon with that 5th overall pick, cornerback from Illinois. Most people expected them to go defensive line. Didn't go defensive line with their first round pick at number 20 either, when with Jackson Smith and Jigba, a wide receiver. Really interesting moves. They did later in the draft address the defensive line and linebacker situation that is problematic for the Seahawks, as well as grabbing another offensive guard, a couple more running backs, a couple other players to fill out their roster. But Charlie, let's first talk about their secondary. Is this the best secondary in the league?
Yes, there's no question.
If healthy, of course, right? Because Jamal Adams obviously has injury concerns. But you're looking at safeties of Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, cornerbacks of Devon Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen, and then a nickelback of Kobe Bryant.
Is this stoppable? No, we are going to have at least 20 interceptions this year.
It is wild. Now, to be fair, Witherspoon, not a big interceptions guy in college, but we will see, and we know that Tariq Woolen definitely is.
He certainly is. Should have won
Jamal
Rookie of the
Adams
Year
not
as well.
either. He's not what you would expect from a safety, but because he is often getting sacks.
Yeah, certainly. But something that I will say that is interesting is we've talked about some teams that have nailed their draft. Who had a confusing draft to you?
You mentioned the Falcons, which I actually disagree with. You didn't think that they should draft Bijan Robinson. I had them picking Bijan Robinson. I think it was a good pick.
I don't. I think that he is a very good player, but they did not address their concerns, which they really needed to do. They don't really have too much of a defense. Their offense, besides their run game, has been horrendous, and now they have no one for Desmond Ridder to throw to.
Fair enough. I also think who had a confusing draft was the Arizona Cardinals. Trading down, then getting an offensive lineman when they probably could have traded down further if they had wanted to. Really interesting draft from them, getting Paris Johnson Jr. Bad, though? I don't know. I think that they might be the worst team in the league right now.
Yeah, I think another contender for that is Tampa. They didn't really address their issues, and they have Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield, not great. Charlie, a couple more points here. Anthony Richardson going to the Colts at number 4. Tyree Wilson going to the Raiders at number 7. Darnell White going to the Bears at number 10. That's the rest of the top 10 that we have not yet discussed. Will Levis, though, falling all the way to the second round to the Tennessee Titans. Seems that the Titans have just completely lost faith in Malik Willis, and it doesn't seem like they think that Tannehill is an option either. But really interesting to see Levis fall that far.
Yeah, it is also rather funny when you realize that Trevor Lawrence is the longest standing quarterback in that division.
Yeah, in fact, all the others are going to be new this year, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, although considering the fact that I believe that Will Levis is actually older than Trevor Lawrence is.
That might be true. One final point on the draft, Charlie, is that we did last week a mock draft, just top 10.
We did.
Both of us got more top 10 picks, correct? Then Mel Kiper Jr. of ESPN got total first round picks correct.
1.
Yeah, he got 1 right. That was Bryce Young. So, congrats to us, I guess.
Congrats. You picked the obvious number 1 pick, and then you couldn't get any other ones.
Yep.
Speaking of obvious things that should have been done before, the Ravens finally signed Lamar Jackson, ending the controversy that has lasted really since he got injured towards the end of last season.
Is it obvious that they should have signed him, though?
Well, yeah, I think that they should have probably given him a fully guaranteed contract to begin with. He was hurt. I believe that he was hurt. He probably could have played, but I don't think it was really worth the injury because considering who else was in the AFC, I don't really think they could have gone very far. Anyway, I think he's a good player, and I do think re-signing him was a smart decision.
Yeah, I have my thoughts on this. I've shared them in previous episodes. You could go back and listen to those. Let's now move on to the NBA postseason. It's the first round concluding in dramatic fashion, and we'll get to that in a minute. We'll start with the rest of the Western Conference first round, though. That Nuggets-Timberwolves series, anything surprising you there?
No, not really. I expected the Nuggets to really cruise their way through. I do have them making the Western Conference Finals.
So you have them going over the Phoenix Suns?
Yes.
Okay, and that was another interesting series because it feels like the Clippers maybe could have beaten the Suns if they didn't have the injury problems that they did with Kawhi and obviously Paul George.
I think it would have been closer. I do think the Suns still would have won that series.
Now let's talk about the Grizzlies-Lakers series. Let's start actually instead of talking about the Lakers, who of course had a very impressive series. Let's start with talking about what the Grizzlies did wrong and what is just wrong with that franchise.
Well, the thing they did wrong was having Dylan Brooks on their roster.
Fair enough. His contract's up. Should he be in the NBA next year?
No. Plain and simple. No.
Yeah, he's not a good player, and there's not talent there. He's just a guy that talks trash and doesn't show anything for it, and he makes his team worse. Straight up, he makes his team worse.
He does.
Right? They lost by 40. They lost by 40 in Game 6.
What a disaster that game was as well.
Yeah. I mean, they've gotten blown out at least twice in that series.
Yeah, 2 huge losses.
Yeah. So what's the future for the Memphis Grizzlies, though?
Do they have one, is the question.
Yeah, I'm curious about what Jaw's going to do, because there's obviously a lot of talent there with Jaw and Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. if Jaren Jackson Jr. does stay there. A lot of questions, but if they blame their loss this year on Steven Adams being gone, which I've already seen that they're somewhat doing, they're not gonna be better because they're gonna keep thinking that they are a championship caliber team. They're not.
Which, yeah, they are clearly not at this point.
Yeah.
All right, let's move now as well.
Warriors Kings.
All right, well, the Warriors had 2 of the greatest performances that we've ever seen, winning Game 6 and Game 7.
Not Game 6. No, Game 6 was a disaster.
Oh no, sorry, Game 7 as well as Game 5.
Yeah, Game 5. Is it Draymond Green that just had an absolutely outstanding Game 5?
Yeah, and also the fact that Curry dropped 50.
Yeah, get to Curry in a sec, but also, Charlie, I mentioned Kevon Looney. 3 games of 20-plus rebounds for the Warriors in the first round. It's
Unbelievable.
absurd. But now, what are your thoughts on what Curry managed to do in Game 7, going into the Golden One Center in Sacramento and dropping 50?
That is really impressive. Now the only question is, can this pretty scrappy Warriors team, can they keep up their progress against a arguably better than the Suns Lakers team?
Yeah. Better than the Kings, you mean?
Yes. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah. I mean, for me, looking back on Curry's performance, I'm biased, obviously, but I think that was Curry's best career performance, and frankly, I think it's one of the all-time great performances in NBA history.
Yeah. I think it was. And considering that we've had 2 in the first round of this playoffs with Jimmy Butler's 56.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler went insane. Let's talk about that Heat Bucks series, Charlie, because the Bucks just not look like themselves. Jimmy Butler absolutely looked like himself. Just an absolute masterclass all first round to knock off the 1 seed Bucks in 5.
Absolutely beautiful. That was incredible. The Bucks really did not stand a chance. Now the question is, considering the fact that the Cavs were knocked out by the Knicks, the Heat have a very good chance.
I feel like they do, but the Knicks, I'm really, really impressed by the Knicks right now. Especially Jalen Brunson. I'm sorry for ever doubting him.
Yes, I was gonna ask, is it the Knicks or is it Jalen Brunson?
Sorry, what?
Are you excited about the Knicks or about Jalen Brunson?
Jalen Brunson.
Because it's a trick question. They're the same thing.
I mean, yeah. Jalen Brunson is the Knicks at this point. It is incredible to see what he has done. And the Knicks
are winners for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah, Brunson, he was a steal with that contract.
Absolutely. So, now, knowing what we know, who do you have in your revised finals?
Ooh, the Denver Nuggets and I'm gonna say it, the New York Knicks.
All right. Actually, interesting enough, I have the same finals as you.
Really?
I do. I have either Knicks and Nuggets or Knicks and, yes, I was right. Either the Knicks and the Nuggets or the Heat and the Nuggets.
So you don't think that whoever wins that Celtics 76ers series is going to have a chance?
No, I think they'll have a chance. I think that'll be a very close series, but I think whoever wins that Knicks Heat series will end up pulling off the upset.
Wow. Okay, then. Move on now to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Let's start, Charlie, with the Kraken, because I know you want to.
Wow, what a series that was. And for the first time, Kraken win a playoff series. 7
Over
games.
the defending champs.
And let me just say right now, we own Colorado.
We truly own Colorado.
Also, pretty sure Seattle fans are never gonna let Russell Wilson live wearing his Avs jersey to the game down.
So I actually looked. I don't think that was actually yesterday. I think that was last season.
Oh, was it?
It's a shame, but yes.
That is a shame, because that would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they're gonna play the Dallas Stars, who picked up a pretty good series win, actually.
Yeah,
your thoughts on that
I don't really
series?
trust this Dallas team. Give me Seattle.
I think that Dallas might actually pull it off. I think I'm pretty high on the Dallas team. Other side of the West, that's going to be Vegas, who looks every bit as good as we thought they would, and Edmonton, who knocks off the LA Kings. Thoughts there?
Yeah, no real surprise there. It's about what we expected. I think if the Kraken move on, which I think they will do, I think that's where they'll get knocked out, most likely by Vegas. But no matter what an amazing season from them.
For the Kraken, yeah. All right, now let's talk about the East, and
I called it.
Let's talk about Boston. But it's time. Let's talk about Boston.
Boston imploded and got eliminated by the Panthers.
Right. Not only did they have a record-breaking regular season, they were up 3-1 in the series against the Panthers, and 3-2 in the game with a minute left in Game 7. The Panthers tie it with an empty net goal. You got Game 7 NHL overtime, maybe the most intense thing in all of sports, and it's the Panthers that pull it out.
Yeah, what a disaster. This means that the team that finished with the greatest record in all 4 major American sports didn't win the championship. The 2007 undefeated Patriots lost in the Super Bowl. The 2001/1904 Cubs and Mariners lost in the ALCS, and I don't know how the playoffs worked back then, but the Cubs didn't win either.
Yep.
And the 2016 Warriors, thanks to Draymond Green shenanigans and Kyrie Irving actually playing pretty well.
Yeah, that's a first. The Draymond shenanigans are not a first.
No, considering what he did to Sabonis.
Oh yeah, he did look very good in Game 5 though. The Panthers, they'll play the Leafs, who managed to actually for once advance past the first round of the playoffs. So congrats to them. And over the Lightning, who have made the last 3 Stanley Cups. The other side on the East is going to be the New Jersey Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes. What are your thoughts on the East from here on out?
I really haven't been paying attention too much to the East side of the bracket. Now that Boston's knocked out, I think Florida's going to gain some pretty big momentum from that. I think Florida's going to beat New Jersey and move on to the Stanley Cup.
Okay then. And finally, before we go, Charlie, Azerbaijan.
Yep, Azerbaijan. I was up at 4:00 in the morning, and not much happened. Leclerc and his Ferrari got beat off the start within the first 3 laps by the completely overpowered, unstoppable Red Bulls at that point. After a safety car was called out due to Nick DeVries having issues after colliding with the wall, Verstappen pits, Perez takes the lead, and the top 3 held. Perez wins, Verstappen in second, Leclerc in third, meaning that Perez draws, I believe, to 8 points behind Verstappen in the championship as we head into Miami this weekend.
They're saying it's possible.
I'm saying it is possible. However, knowing how Formula One works, it is very likely that in a situation in which they are both competing for the championship, Perez would be sacrificed for Verstappen to win.
All right, and finally, before we go, this is the day that this episode's being released. This is the 1-year anniversary of C&C Talks, Charlie. We did a live stream about it over the weekend. But what are your thoughts 1 year in?
Yeah, it is. It's hard to believe. There's been a lot of changes, not only in the podcast, in the world, but also to us personally. What an amazing year it's been for some things. What a horrible year it has been for other things. And all we can say is that we'll still be here, giving you all the news in politics, world events, and sports that you'll need for years to come.
Yep, and yeah, you said it well. Really, really good first year, I think. On a personal note, I think that we have improved a lot at this.
Yeah, for anyone
Covered
watching, please don't go watch our first episode.
No, please don't. We've covered some amazing things.
Some horrible things.
Some horrible things. First episode was about Twitter, mostly, with Elon Musk buying the platform. Then before we even released it, but shortly after we taped it, Charlie, our very first episode, we got word of a leak from the Supreme Court.
Yes, we did. And I actually, in fact, remember we were sitting at the lunch table. You were telling us that. And we figured, hey, you know what? We'll get our first guest on. If you remember that from episode 2.
Yep.
What an episode that was. A few weeks later, the Uvalde shooting, and we had our special episode with our humanities teacher. Thank you to Scott. And it's been up from there.
The world has changed so much in the last year. It will continue to change over the next year, and we will be here to tell you all about it. So
to anyone who sees this, who's been watching for all this time, or even part of the time, thank you for listening to this podcast, and thank you for inspiring us to make it the best we can.
Yeah, and as always, make sure that if you're not already, that you subscribe, because we have episodes going out every single Wednesday, available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. This is our website, cctalks.net, which has everything you need to know about the show, and call us with your questions, 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. For our producer Morris, our production designer Zach, and our proof editor Drake, thank you so much for listening for the last year and today. We will see you next week. I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. Happy birthday, C&C Talks.